Have you ever heard a story that spans just a handful of pages, yet changes something within you that remains forever? Today, we are going to talk about a unique, lesser-known and extremely profound story by one of the greatest writers of Russian literature, Fyodor Dostoevsky, titled The Dream of a Ridiculous Man. This is not an ordinary story. There is no action, no thrilling twist, nor any major events. And yet it shakes you to your very core. This story forces you to plunge into the deepest abysses of the soul. Who am I? Why am I alive? And does my life have a purpose? Before we venture into this narrative ocean, let's learn a little more about this book and its creator. Fyodor Dostoevsky is a name that needs no introduction in the world of literature. Born in 19th century Russia, Dostoevsky tackled themes such as the complexities of the human mind, moral conflict, and faith in God with unparalleled depth. His writings do not fear human weaknesses, but expose them and place a mirror before us. His famous works, Crime and Punishment, The Idiot, The Brothers Karamazov, and Notes from the Underground are all narratives of man's quest for his own soul. But the story we are talking about today, The Dream of a Ridiculous Man, is a short tale, but one of burning philosophical intensity. This story was first published in 1877 in a Russian magazine. And since then, it has remained a favorite of all who ask deep questions about existence, self-knowledge, and human consciousness. The speciality of this story is that it shows the spiritual journey of a person whom society has completely ignored, who himself thinks he is of no importance. But then an event occurs that completely transforms his thinking and perspective. The story takes the form of a dream, but the truth hidden in that dream is more vivid and piercing than reality. Through this story, Dostoevsky not only tells the story of an individual, but he descends into the psychological depths of all humanity. He raises the question, can man really change himself? And if one single man changes, can it change the entire world? In this video, we will listen to this story step by step, without rushing, without revealing any crucial details. Just know this, it's not just a story, it's an experience. Asterisk, asterisk, beginning of the narrator's tale, asterisk, asterisk. I am a ridiculous man. Now people even call me mad. If I still seemed as ridiculous to them as before, one might call it progress. But now it doesn't bother me. Now they are all dear to me, even when they laugh at me. And to tell the truth, when they laugh, that's when they are dearest to me. If I wanted, I could laugh with them, not at myself, but out of love for them. If only I didn't feel so much sorrow when I look at them. The sorrow of knowing that they don't know the truth, and that I do. So, how difficult it is when only one person in the world knows the truth, but they will not understand it. No, they will never understand. Before, when people found me ridiculous, I used to feel a lot of sorrow. Not just because of appearances, but because I was truly ridiculous. I have always been ridiculous. And perhaps I have known it since my birth. Perhaps by the age of 7, I had already realized that I was ridiculous. Then I went to school. Then I studied at the university. And, the more I learned, the more deeply I understood that I was truly ridiculous. I started to feel that everything I studied at the university only served to prove how ridiculous I was. The more deeply I understood these subjects, the clearer my understanding of this truth became. With life, it was the same as with science. With every passing year, every relationship, this feeling strengthened. I am a ridiculous man. Everyone always laughed at me. But no one knew, nor even suspected, that if there was one person in the world who knew better than anyone how laughable I was, it was I myself. And what pained me the most was that they didn't know it, but it was my fault. I was so proud that I never dared to tell anyone. This pride grew in me year after year, and if I had ever confessed to anyone that I was ridiculous, I might have shot myself that very evening. Oh, how I suffered in my childhood for fear of revealing this secret to my school friends. But since I became an adult, for some unknown reason, I calmed down a bit. Although every year I felt my terrible condition more deeply. I say I don't know why, because until today I have not been able to understand why it happened. Perhaps because a great anxiety was growing in my soul. More important than anything else, and that was the conviction that nothing in the world has any meaning. I had felt it vaguely for a long time, but the complete understanding came suddenly last year. Suddenly, I felt that whether the world exists or never existed, it made no difference to me. I started to feel from the depths of myself that nothing really exists. At first, it seemed that in the past there might have been something, but I gradually understood that perhaps in the past there was nothing either. Simply, for some reason, I had felt that way. Gradually, I also started to feel that in the future there would be nothing. So I stopped getting angry with people. Even more, I almost stopped noticing them. This started to show in small things. Like, for example, I often bumped into people while walking on the street. And it wasn't because I was lost in deep thoughts, because I had nothing left to think about. By that time, I had already lost the habit of thinking. Nothing mattered to me, if only I could solve my problems. But I solved none, and although there were many, I simply stopped caring about them and all the problems disappeared on their own. And it was only after this that I understood the truth. I knew the truth in November of last year, exactly on the 3rd of November, and since then, I remember every moment of that instant. It was a very sad night, perhaps the saddest that can exist. I was returning home around 11 at night, and I remember thinking that there could be no sadder night. The sadness was felt not only internally, but also externally. It had rained all day, a cold, sad, almost frightening rain. I remember it still, as if in that rain there was a hidden anger towards humans. Then, between 10 and 11 at night, the rain suddenly stopped. But the humidity that followed was even more terrifying, as if it was colder and heavier than the rain itself. From everything, from every stone, from every alley, a strange vapor rose. As far as the eye could see, everything seemed soaked and heavy. Suddenly, a thought. If all these street lamps were extinguished, perhaps everything would be a little less depressing. These gaslights revealed everything, and it made the heart even heavier. That day, I hadn't even eaten dinner properly. I had spent the evening with an engineer, and 2 other friends were also present. I sat silently the whole time. Perhaps I was boring them. They were talking about an interesting topic and suddenly became enthusiastic. But I could see that in reality they didn't care. They were simply pretending. Suddenly, I said, "Friends, in reality, you don't care neither about this nor that." They didn't get angry, but laughed. Perhaps because I had said it without complaint or anger, simply because nothing mattered to me anymore. And when they saw that I didn't care, they found it funny. While I was thinking about the street gas lamps, I looked up at the sky. The sky was terribly dark, but torn clouds were visible, and between these clouds, dark spots of a deep blackness were discernible. Suddenly, in one of these dark spots, I saw a star and began to stare at it, because that star gave me an idea. At that very instant, I decided that I would kill myself that night. 2 months earlier, I had already firmly decided to commit suicide, and as poor as I was, that very day I had bought a beautiful revolver and loaded it. But 2 months passed, and it was still in my drawer. I had become so miserable that I was only looking for the moment when I would no longer feel sad. Why? I don't know. Every night when I returned home, I thought that I would shoot myself that night. But I was waiting for the right moment, and now that star gave me an idea. I decided that yes, this night would be the night. And why that star gave me that idea, I still don't know. And just as I was looking at the sky, a little girl grabbed my elbow. The street was completely deserted. Almost no one was visible. In the distance, in a cab, a coachman was sleeping. The little girl was about 8 years old. She had an old scarf tied on her head and a small, soaked dress in poor condition. But what I noticed most were her wet and broken shoes. I still remember it clearly. Suddenly, she tugged at my elbow and called out to me. She wasn't crying, but disordered sounds were coming from her mouth. As if she wanted to say something, but couldn't speak properly, trembling. Her whole body was trembling. She was very frightened by something. She kept repeating, "Mama, Mama." I turned towards her, but I said nothing and continued walking. But she ran alongside me, pulling me. Her voice had that desperation found in the voices of frightened children. I know that tone. Although she couldn't speak properly, I understood that perhaps her mother was dying or some terrible accident was happening. And she had run out to call someone, to seek help. I didn't go with her, but I felt an inner impulse to shoo her away. First, I told her to call a policeman, but she clasped her hands and continued running beside me, panting, out of breath, but not giving up. Then I stamped my foot and shouted at her. She cried out, "Sir, sir," but suddenly she let go of me and ran across the street. There was another pedestrian there. Perhaps seeing him, she moved away from me and ran towards him. I went up to the 5th floor. I have a small room in an apartment where other tenants live. My room is small and poor, with a semicircular window in the roof. There is a sofa covered with American cloth, a table with a few books, 2 chairs and a comfortable armchair, very old, but of sturdy, old-fashioned design. I sat down silently. I lit a candle and began to think. In the next room, on the other side of the partition, there was a completely mad uproar. It had been going on for 3 days. A retired captain lived there, who came with half a dozen guests. People of suspicious appearance, who drank vodka and played stuss with old cards. The previous night, there had even been a fight. I know that 2 of them had pulled each other's hair and dragged each other around for a good while. The landlady didn't dare say anything because she was very afraid of that captain. In the apartment, there was another tenant, a thin little woman, who had come to St. Petersburg with 3 young children. Since her arrival, the children had fallen ill. She and her children were very afraid of the captain. They trembled all night, crossed themselves, and the youngest had had some kind of fit out of fear. I also know for certain that this captain sometimes stopped people on Nevsky Prospect to beg. It is the main street of Russia that runs through the historical center of the city. No one hires him. But what is strange, and that's why I'm telling all this, is that for the entire month the captain has lived here. His antics haven't bothered me at all. From the beginning, I kept my distance, and he too grew tired of me. But now, no matter how much he shouts from the other side of the partition, or how many people are there, I don't care. I stay awake all night and completely forget them. I don't even hear their voices. I stay awake until dawn. This has been my routine for a year. I sit in my armchair. I do nothing at the table. I only read during the day. At night, I simply sit. I don't even think. Some random thoughts come, then go. I let them come and go. Every night, a whole candle burns down. That day too, I sat silently at the table, took out the revolver, and placed it in front of me. As soon as I put it down, I asked myself, do I remember this? Is it really so? And then I answered with total conviction, yes, it is so. That is, I am going to shoot myself. I was absolutely certain that I would shoot myself that night. But I didn't know how long I would sit at the table. And perhaps I would have really shot myself if that little girl hadn't appeared. Look, although nothing mattered to me anymore, I could still feel pain. If someone hurt me, I felt pain. It was the same at the emotional level. If something was very painful, I felt the same pain as before when things had meaning in life. That same evening, I had felt pity for that little girl. If it had happened at another time, I would certainly have helped her. So, why didn't I help that little girl? Because at that moment, a strange thought came to my mind. While she was pulling me and shouting, a question presented itself to me that I couldn't find an answer to. This question was useless, but it disturbed me. It irritated me that, if I had decided to end my life that night, then nothing in life should matter to me. So, why did I suddenly feel a strange pain, which didn't match my state at all? To tell the truth, I don't even know how to describe that momentary condition. But that condition persisted even when I returned home and sat at the table, and I became very angry, as I hadn't been in years. One thought followed another. I saw clearly that as long as I am a human being, as long as I am something and not nothing, I am alive. Therefore, I can feel pain, I can get angry, and I can be ashamed of my actions. Okay, I admit it. But if I am to shoot myself in 2 hours, then what does that little girl have to do with me? Why should I be ashamed? Or why should I care about anything in this world? I am going to become nothing. Absolutely zero. And is it really possible that, knowing this truth that I will completely disappear, that everything will end with me, I continue to pity that little girl or be ashamed of that despicable act? I stamped my foot in front of the poor little girl and shouted at her, as if I was saying, not only do I not feel pity, but even if I become completely inhuman and vile, I am free to do so, because in 2 hours everything will be over. Do you believe that is why I shouted at her? Now, I am almost completely convinced that yes, that was the reason. I began to feel that the world and life now depended on me. It seemed as if this world had been created only for me. If I kill myself, then this whole world will cease to exist for me. I'm not saying that when I leave, everything will cease to exist for everyone else. But I can say that as soon as my consciousness ceases, this whole world will also cease. It will become zero, like an illusion, as if it were only a reflection of my consciousness. Because it is possible that this whole world, all these people, are only me. I remember that while I was sitting there thinking, all these new questions arising in my heart, one after another, I suddenly turned them in the opposite direction. And then I began to think of something completely new. For example, a strange thought came to my mind. Suppose I had lived one day on the moon or on Mars, and I had committed a shameful and vile act there, so shameful that it can only be imagined in nightmares. And now, if I am on Earth and I clearly remember that vile act I committed on that other planet, but at the same time I am absolutely certain that I will never return there, then if from there on Earth I look at the moon, will I be ashamed or not? Will I feel guilt for that act or feel something? These questions might seem useless and trivial because the revolver was already in front of me and my whole being was filled with the certainty that I would do it today. But despite all that, these questions shook me internally. I became terribly agitated inside. I could no longer die before having an answer to these questions. The simple conclusion was that that little girl had saved me because I pressed the trigger just because of these questions. Meanwhile, the uproar in the captain's room was beginning to gradually calm down. Their game was over. Now they were preparing to sleep, a bit of muttering, a quiet settlement of disputes, and suddenly I fell asleep on the same chair at the table. This had never happened to me before. Without realizing it, I fell asleep. The dreams, as we all know, are very strange. Some parts are so vivid that they seem carved with the precision of a jewel. Every detail is perfectly clear, and some parts we pass through as if they don't exist. As if we are passing through space and time without realizing it. Dreams are not guided by logic, but by desire. Not the brain, but the heart. And yet, in dreams, my logic plays such a complex game. So many unknown and strange things happen that have no logic. My brother died 5 years ago, but sometimes I see him in a dream. He participates in my life. We are both very involved in something. And yet, throughout the dream, I know that my brother is dead and buried. So, how is it possible that he is with me, working with me, and I am not at all surprised? Why does my logic completely accept it? Well, enough. I will now begin with my dream. Yes, I had a dream. The dream of the night of November 3rd. Now people mock me, saying it was just a dream. But what does it matter whether it was a dream or reality? If this dream showed me the truth. If once a man recognizes the truth, sees it, then you know that it is the truth. And there can be no other truth. Whether you are asleep or awake. Suppose it was a dream, okay? But this real life, which you consider so grand, which I myself was about to end by committing suicide, in the midst of this life, my dream showed me a new life, a completely different life, reborn, great and full of living force. I told you that I fell asleep without realizing it, and it seemed that I was still thinking about the same things. Suddenly, I dreamed that I took my revolver and aimed directly at my heart, not my head. Although I had already decided to shoot myself in the head, in my right temple. But now I aimed directly at my chest. And then I stood still for 1 or 2 seconds. And suddenly my candle, my table, and the wall in front of me began to tremble and turn, as if everything was shaking. Everything came completely alive. I pressed the trigger quickly. In dreams, we often fall from a height, or someone stabs you or hits you, but we never feel pain. Yes, if in reality we hit the bed, we might feel a little pain, and often it wakes you up. In my dream, something similar happened. While shooting, I felt no pain, but I felt as if everything inside me had been shaken, as if everything had suddenly become blurry. And around me, a deep and terrible darkness fell. I felt as if I had become blind. My whole body became numb. I was lying face down on something hard. I couldn't see anything and I couldn't move at all. People were walking round me. They were shouting. The captain was speaking loudly. The landlady was shouting. And suddenly something broke, and now I was being carried in a closed coffin. I clearly felt the coffin moving, and I was thinking about it, and then for the first time this thought came to my mind. I am dead. Completely dead. I was absolutely certain of it. No doubt I couldn't see, I couldn't move, and yet I was thinking, I was feeling. But soon, as often happens in dreams, I accepted this condition, as if there was no discussion. What is, and now I had been buried in the earth. Everyone had left. I was completely alone. Completely alone. I couldn't move at all. Before, whenever I imagined myself buried, only one sensation came to my mind: dampness and cold. And now, in reality, I felt a lot of cold, especially at the tips of my toes. But apart from that, I felt nothing else. I lay in silence. What was strange was that I wasn't expecting anything. I had accepted without question that a dead man expects nothing. But there was dampness. I don't know how much time passed. An hour, several days, or many days. Then, suddenly, a drop of water fell on my closed left eye, dripping from the center of the coffin lid. A minute later, a second drop. Then a minute later, a third, and so on every minute, perfectly regular. And then a deep anger exploded in my heart. And at the same moment, I also felt a sharp physical pain. This is my bullet wound, I thought. It's because of that bullet. And every minute, drop after drop fell on my closed eye. Completely mechanical, according to a pattern. And then, suddenly, not with a voice, but with my whole being, I called out to that power which was doing all this, which was responsible for it. You, whoever you are, if you truly exist, and if something more sensible than what is happening here now is possible, then let it be here, right now. But if you are punishing me for my stupid suicide through this terrible and repugnant life, then listen, no violence can be greater than the contempt I will feel in silence without saying a word. Even if this painful journey continues for millions of years. I shouted that, and then fell silent. A whole minute passed in complete silence, then another drop fell. But now I had an infinite and unshakable certainty that everything was about to change immediately. And then my grave suddenly opened. Either it was opened, or it was dug up. I don't know. But a dark, unknown being seized me, and we felt that we were flying in space. Suddenly I regained my sight. In the sky there was a night darkness, a darkness like I had never seen before. We were flying very far from the Earth into space. I asked no questions of the being that was carrying me. I was proud within myself, and I simply waited. I convinced myself that I was not afraid, and thinking that I was not afraid, I felt a kind of ecstasy. I don't know how long we flew. As often happens in dreams, space, time, logic, everything is transcended, and we stop only at the places where the heart desires to stop. I remember that suddenly, in that darkness, a star appeared. "Is that serious?" I asked suddenly, although I didn't want to ask questions. "No," replied the being. "It is the same star that you saw between the clouds. When you were returning home, I knew that the being had a somewhat human face. What is strange is that I didn't like this being at all. On the contrary, I felt a deep hatred towards him. I had hoped for complete non-existence, and that is why I had shot myself in the heart. But now I was in the hands of a creature that was not human, but which was alive, which existed. So, does that mean there is life after the grave? I thought, suddenly, with that slight gravity that often occurs in dreams. But in the depths of my heart, I was the same as before. I had not changed at all. And if now I have to exist again, I thought, if I have to live again under the influence of some powerful and unknown power, then I will not yield and will not debase myself. You know that I am afraid of you, and you despise me for that, I said suddenly to the being. A question that was an admission of my inferiority, and as if that question had driven a needle into my chest. He did not answer my question, but suddenly I felt that he didn't even despise me. He was mocking me, and he felt not the slightest pity for me. And this journey had a mysterious and unknown purpose that concerned only me. The fear in my heart was continually growing. In the silence of this being, there was something that, without words, was sinking into me like a pain and spreading throughout my being. We were flying in a deep and unknown space. I no longer saw those familiar constellations that are always visible from Earth. I knew that there are many distant stars whose light takes thousands or millions of years to reach Earth. Perhaps we were now flying on those paths. In my heart there was a terrible anxiety, as if something was about to happen. Something that would completely break me. And then, suddenly, a familiar sensation rose in me. Something that stirred the depths of my soul. Suddenly, I saw something like our sun. I knew that it was not the same sun that gives life to our earth. We were at an infinite distance from that real sun. But despite everything, with my whole being, I was sure that it was exactly the same sun, an exact replica. In my heart, a sweet and resonant sensation of ecstasy rose. The same power of the light that had once given me life created an agitation in my heart, as if my heart had awakened again. For the first time since I had been buried in the grave, I felt that I was alive. But if this is the sun, I cried out, and it is exactly like ours, then where is the earth? And the being pointed to a bright green star in the distance. We were flying directly towards it. Is such repetition possible in the universe? Could it be a law of nature? And if it really means something, could it be exactly like our Earth, as poor as suffering, but yet forever dear and priceless? One that awakens in the heart of its most ungrateful children the same intense and deep love that we feel for our Earth. I cried out loud, trembling with a mad and unshakable love for the familiar earth I had left behind. And then the image of that poor little girl I had rejected came to my mind. "You will see everything," replied the being who was with me, and in his voice there was a glimmer of sadness. But now we were rapidly approaching that planet. It was growing before my eyes. Now I could see oceans in it. The outline of Europe was becoming clearer, and at the same time something burned in my heart with a pure and deep flame, like a pure longing that touched my soul. How can this be a repetition? And why do it? I can only love this earth, the one I left, whose soil I soaked with my blood when, in my ingratitude, I ended my life by shooting myself in the heart. But I never, at any moment, stopped loving this earth, and perhaps that same night when I left it, I loved it even more than before. Is there also suffering on this new earth? On our earth, we can only love through suffering and with suffering. We do not know how to love otherwise. I need suffering to be able to love. I am sorry, I am thirsty. At this very moment, I want to kiss the earth I left with tears in my eyes. And I cannot accept any other life on any other earth, but my companion had abandoned me. Suddenly, without knowing how, I found myself standing on a new earth. On a sunny, bright day as beautiful as paradise. I think I was perhaps on those islands that are in the Greek seas of our earth, or perhaps on the coast of the mainland facing those islands. Oh, everything was like on our earth, but everything had a different festive glow, as if a pure and blessed victory was being celebrated. The sea, green like an emerald, was gently breaking against the shore, and as if it was kissing the coast with love, completely deliberately. Tall and beautiful trees were in their spring splendor. Their innumerable leaves seemed to me to be whispering humbly, as if they were speaking to me with love. In the grass, fragrant and bright flowers were blooming. Flocks of birds were flying in the sky. They perched fearlessly on my arms and shoulders, and touched me with their innocent and fluttering wings, as if they were playing with me. And finally, I saw the people of this happy earth, and I recognized them. They came towards me. They surrounded me. They embraced me. They were the children of the sun, their own children of the sun. Oh, how beautiful they were! I had never seen such beauty in humans on our earth. Perhaps only in our children. When they are very young, can one glimpse a faint reflection of such beauty? The eyes of these people had a pure gleam. Their faces had a light of peace and understanding that comes from perfect perception. And yet these faces were smiling. Their voices, their words, had a childish joy. Oh, from the first moment I saw them, I understood everything. This was the earth that had never been sullied by the fall of sin. Here lived people who had never sinned. It was a paradise like the one told in our old stories where our first parents lived before sin. But the difference was that here the whole earth was paradise. These people, laughing, surrounding me, touching me, loving me, took me to their homes. All were trying to console me. Oh, they asked me no questions, but it seemed they already knew everything, and they simply wanted to erase every trace of pain from my face. And you know what? Let's admit that it was just a dream. But the sensation of the love of these innocent and beautiful people still lives in me. I feel that their love is still flowing towards me from afar. I saw them myself. I knew them. I believed completely. I loved them. And then I suffered for them. Oh, even then, I understood that about many things. I could not understand them. As a modern Russian and progressive and miserable resident of St. Petersburg, it seemed very strange to me that, knowing so much, they had no science like ours. But I soon understood that their sense of knowledge was completely different from ours, the earthlings. Their desires were different. They desired nothing, and yet they were complete. They did not have to understand life as we want to understand it, because their life was already perfect. And yet their knowledge was much higher and deeper than ours. Our science tries to explain what life is, how to live, and how to teach to love others, but they knew how to live without any science, and that I understood, but I could not understand their knowledge. They showed me their trees, and the deep love with which they looked at them. I could not understand it. It seemed they were talking to them, and perhaps I am not wrong if I say they were really talking to them. Yes, they had attained that language, and I can say with certainty that the trees understood them too. They saw nature in the same way. The animals who lived in peace with them did not harm them, but loved them, had bowed before their love. They pointed to the stars and told me something I could not understand, but I am sure they were connected to those stars not only by thought, but by a living connection. Oh, they never insisted that I understand them. They loved me as I was. But I knew they could never understand me, so I spoke very little with them about our earth. I just kept kissing their earth, and in silence I worshipped them, and they were not ashamed seeing it, but gave me complete freedom to worship them, because they themselves loved deeply. When sometimes I kissed their feet while crying, they felt no sorrow for me, but returned love to me with joy. I often wondered with astonishment, how is it that they never offended a man like me? How is it that they never aroused in me feelings of irritation or envy? I thought that being so proud and false, I had never mentioned to them the things I knew, things they perhaps did not know. I never desired to surprise them or correct them. They were as cheerful and mischievous as young children. They roamed their magnificent forests and gardens. They sang songs with their sweet and cherished voices. Their food was very light and natural: fruits from the trees, honey from the forests, and milk from the animals that loved them. The little work they did for food and clothing was very brief and not exhausting. They loved and gave birth to children, but I never saw in them that cruel lust which dominates almost all humans on our earth and which is at the root of almost all human sins. When a child was born, they rejoiced in it as a new life that would share their happiness. There were no feelings of dispute, envy, or jealousy among them. They didn't even know the meaning of these words. Their children were the children of all, because altogether they formed a single family. Among them, diseases were very rare. Yes, there was death, but very peaceful. The elderly died as if they had fallen asleep, praying, smiling at their loved ones surrounding them, and saying their last goodbye. I never saw mourning or tears, only love that reached a state of ecstasy, but a calm and constant ecstasy, as if they were in deep contemplation. It seemed that even after death they remained in contact with their loved ones, as if the unity of their earth could not even be broken by death. When I asked them about eternal life, they did not understand me well, because for them it was not a question at all. They were so sure of it that they didn't need to prove it. They had no temples, but in them they had a living and constant feeling of unity with the whole universe. They had no religion or beliefs, but in them they had a deep knowledge that when their earthly happiness reached its earthly limits, they would have an even deeper union with the whole universe, both with the living and the dead. They awaited that moment, but without haste. They felt a premonition of this union in their hearts and talked about it among themselves. In the evening, before sleeping, they loved to sit together and sing songs. They sang with soft, melodious voices, and in these songs they expressed the feelings of the entire day. They praised the beauty of the day and bid it farewell with love. In their songs they praised nature, the sea, the forests. They loved to make songs about each other, like children praising each other. These songs were very simple and direct, but they came from the heart and went straight to the listener's heart. And not just in songs, but in their whole life, it seemed they were only praising each other. It was as if all loved each other, but it was not romantic love, but a universal love that encompassed everything. Some of their songs were so deep and selfless that I could not understand them completely. I understood the words, but their real meaning was beyond my mind. Yet my heart absorbed them gradually, without knowing how. I told them several times that I had already felt all this before, that this joy and this light I had also experienced on our earth, but in the form of a sad nostalgia, which often became an unbearable pain. I told them that in my dreams and imagination I had already felt them and their greatness. I said that often on earth, when I saw the sunset, my eyes would fill with tears. That when I felt hatred towards humans, There was also a strange pain that I could not hate them without loving them. And when I loved them, there was also a hint of pain that I could not love them without hating them. They listened to my words, and I knew they probably did not fully understand what I meant. But I did not regret it, because I knew they felt my deep pain that I had experienced in leaving them. And when they looked at me with their innocent and love-filled eyes, and when among them I felt my heart as innocent and guiltless, then the sensation of the perfection of life did not let me breathe, and in silence I worshipped them. Now, everyone laughs at me and says that the things I describe in such detail cannot be dreamed. Everyone says that I only experienced a sensation, a feverish and confused dream, and I invented all the rest after waking up. And when I said that, yes, perhaps it was so, then, my God, they laughed even louder. A storm of laughter broke over me. I became an object of mockery. Yes, I admit that only one intense sensation of my dream remained in me most deeply. And perhaps that is the one that is most engraved in my wounded soul. But the forms, the images I saw in my dream were so musical, beautiful, and captivating that when I woke up, it seemed impossible to express them in my poor language. So yes, perhaps I was forced to add some things afterwards to be able to explain at least something to people, and in this process things may have become distorted. But on the other hand, how can I deny that everything was real? Perhaps the dream, as I say, was 1,000 times brighter, more beautiful and joyful. Let's admit it was a dream, but this dream was so real. Shall I tell you a secret? Perhaps it was not a dream at all, because afterwards something happened, something so terrifying and true that it is impossible to imagine it in a dream. It may be that my heart created this dream, but can a heart alone create such a terrifying truth? My little heart, my wandering and superficial mind, could it have invented by itself a glimpse of such a great truth? No, think about it yourself. Until now, I had hidden this. But now I tell the truth. The truth is that I corrupted them all. Yes, finally, it happened that I contaminated them all. How did it happen? I don't know exactly, but I remember it clearly. The dream spanned thousands of years, but in me only a general sensation remained that I was the cause of their fall. Like a dirty worm, like a plague virus, I spread over their pure and immaculate earth, which before my arrival was filled with innocence and happiness. They learned to lie. They began to appreciate lies and savor their sweetness. Perhaps it started as a joke, a mischief, or just with a small seed of a lie. But that lie infiltrated their hearts and pleased them. Then began the birth of lust. From lust came envy. From envy sprang cruelty. And then what happened? I don't remember exactly, but I remember that very soon the first blood was shed. They were surprised, frightened, and began to separate from each other. They divided into groups, but each group formed against the others. Then came accusation, slander, and after that, the feeling of shame. From shame came the notion of morality. Then the concept of honor was born. Each group began to wave its flags. They began to torture animals. The animals, frightened, fled into the forests and became enemies. Then began the struggle for selfishness. Separation occurred. This is mine. That is yours. Their very language divided. Now they began to understand suffering, and gradually they began to love suffering. They thought that truth can only be found through suffering. Then came knowledge. The worse they became, the more they talked about brotherhood and humanity. The more criminal they became, the more they invented justice. They established laws and even created the guillotine to enforce them. Little by little, they forgot what they had lost. They even laughed at the possibility of their former happiness. Everything seemed like a false dream to them. They had no authentic memory of that paradise. But what was strange was that, despite forgetting, they remained obsessed with the desire to regain it. They began to worship that lost innocent happiness as an idea. They built temples and, creating idols of it, worshipped it while crying. But if someone showed them that old paradise again and asked, "Would you like to return there?" they said clearly, no. They said, "We are false sinners, unjust. We know everything, and we also cry about it. We punish ourselves." Perhaps even more than that merciful judge whose name we don't even know. But we have knowledge, and with the help of knowledge, we will find the truth. We will attain it consciously. Knowledge is superior to feeling. The consciousness of life is superior to life itself. Knowledge will give us wisdom. Wisdom will reveal the laws to us, and the knowledge of these laws will be superior to happiness, and that is what they said. And saying this, each began to love himself more than anything, and they could not help it. Every person became so jealous of his individual rights that they made the oppression and destruction of the individuality of others the goal of life. Then came slavery, even voluntary slavery. The weak willingly submitted to the powerful, provided that they helped them oppress the even weaker. Then came saints who, crying, spoke to them of pride, imbalance, and the shame of lust. But either they were mocked, or they were stoned and driven away. Sacred blood flowed on the thresholds of the temples. Then appeared people who thought about how to gather everyone again, so that each loves himself, but does not interfere with others, and forms a harmonious society. Result: war. And as this idea spread, everyone drew the swords of their intellect. Everyone thought that knowledge, reason, and the instinct of self-preservation would finally unite humanity. So, what did they do? They said, "Let's get rid of those who do not understand our idea, so that our ideal is realized more quickly." But the instinct of self-preservation gradually weakened. Now appeared proud and libertine humans who said, "All or nothing," and to obtain all, they committed crimes and failing committed suicide. Now new religions were born that taught emptiness. The cessation of existence is peace, and self-destruction is liberation. Gradually, people began to tire of this meaningless struggle. Now, their faces began to show a glimmer of suffering. Then they said, "Suffering is beauty," because now they felt that only suffering had meaning. They sang hymns to the greatness of suffering. And I wandered among them, wringing my hands, crying, and yet I loved them even more than before. I loved their earth sullied by sin more than that paradise, because now there was suffering there. Yes, I have always loved suffering and affliction, but only for myself. Now, when I saw them suffering, I regretted. I told them that all this happened because of me. It is I who brought this lie, this poison, this corruption. I begged them to crucify me. I taught them to make crosses. I could not kill myself. I did not have the courage. But I wanted to suffer at their hands. I wanted my blood to be shed to the last drop. I wanted pain. But what did they do? They laughed at me, then began to consider me mad. They said, "You are not a criminal. You were just a dream. What happened was a desire in us, and what is now was what had to be." Finally, they said, "You are becoming dangerous. If you don't be quiet, we will lock you up in a madhouse." And then a deep pain seized my soul. My heart twisted as if I were dying. And then I woke up. It was that morning. It wasn't completely day yet. It was almost 6 o'clock. I woke up with a start on the same armchair where I had fallen asleep without realizing it. The candle had burned out. In the captain's room, everyone was in a deep sleep, and there was an astonishing silence around me, very rare in our apartment. I stood up, surprised. I had never had such a strange experience. Even in life, I had never fallen asleep sitting on a chair. And then I looked at the revolver, loaded, ready. I felt a shock, but I immediately pushed it away. Oh, now I only want life. Life. I raised my hands and, without words, only with tears, I invoked the infinite truth. A wave of indescribable and strange joy ran through my being. Just life. And now I had a determination to proclaim this truth all my life. I began to proclaim the good news. I want to bring it to all. The good news of the truth. Because I have seen it with my own eyes, in all its splendor and glory. Now I live to proclaim this one truth, and since then I preach. And the strangest thing is that the people who laugh at me, I love them even more. Why do I do this? I don't even know myself. I simply do it. They say I am confused and unclear, and if I am like this now, who knows what will happen later? Yes, it's true. I am confused. I get entangled in words, and perhaps I will make even more mistakes in the future. Because proclaiming the truth is not easy. How to say it? What to say? In what language? How to demonstrate it with my life? I will have to find answers to all these questions. But listen. Who doesn't make mistakes? Everyone, whether they are scholars or thieves, are heading towards the same destination. Only the paths are different. It is an ancient truth. But the novelty is that I can no longer go astray. Why? Because I have seen the truth. I have seen that man can be beautiful and happy without leaving this earth. I cannot believe that evil is the natural state of humanity, and that is my faith, which people laugh at. But how not to believe? I have seen it. I have seen it clearly. I did not invent it. This image has fixed itself in me forever. I know that perhaps I will use the wrong words. Sometimes I will speak in the language of others, but not for long, because this image, this living experience, will guide me each time on the right path. I am ready, even if it takes 1,000 years. In the beginning, I wanted to hide that I had corrupted that paradise. But that was my first mistake. The truth stopped me. It whispered to me, "You lie," and it saved me and corrected me. But how to create paradise on this earth, I don't know, because my words fail. At least the central words, the most necessary. But no matter, I will continue to walk. I will continue to speak. I will never stop, because I have seen it, although I cannot express it, and the people who laugh do not understand. They say it was a dream, an illusion, a madness. As if by saying that, the whole truth is refuted. But I ask, what is a dream? Is this life that we live not also a dream? I would say, and then, if it was a dream, if this paradise never happens, I will still proclaim it. And everything is so simple. Only one thing is necessary, to love others as one loves oneself. That is all. Everything else will arrange itself. It is an ancient truth, said thousands of times, but never lived. Now, I just have to fight against this. That knowledge, experience, and consciousness are the highest, not life. No life is the highest if it is filled with love. If only all want it, in one single day, in one single hour, everything can change. And yes, I found that little girl again. And now I have started to walk, and I will continue to walk. Conclusion and analysis. This story by Fyodor Dostoevsky is not just the story of a dream, but a profound philosophical exploration of human existence, its soul, and the power of love. It is the story of a man who considers himself ridiculous and decides to commit suicide. But a dream leads him to self-knowledge and transforms his entire thinking. The story begins with deep despair. The narrator sees no purpose in life. He thinks everything is useless. Morality, truth, feelings, everything is false. But when he falls asleep, he has a dream that takes him to another earth. There, people live in an innocent, loving, and completely natural way. There are no lies, violence, or envy. That other earth is a kind of ideal society, a utopia, like man's dearest imagination. But the narrator brings with him his seed, that is, his inner impurity, and gradually introduces lies, lust, envy, and murder into that pure society. This shows a universal weakness of man, no matter how ideal the environment. If our soul is stained, we can corrupt everything. Dostoevsky explores. Is man intrinsically sinful or simply lost? The narrator feels the weight of this sin and, upon waking, is filled with a new perspective. Now he wants to follow the path of love, truth, and change. The story has several deep themes, such as individual redemption, collective corruption, and spiritual awakening. The narrator now believes that if every human being, for just one day, begins to love others with a sincere heart, the world can transform instantly. But others consider him mad. He himself says that if people consider him mad, it doesn't matter to him because he has seen the truth with his own eyes. This story gives us a simple but powerful message. Love is everything, and every human being can be redeemed, no matter how low he has fallen. Dostoevsky also shows that the line between dream and reality is not so clear, because sometimes a dream can be truer than truth itself. If you liked this story and its analysis, don't forget to like the video. In the comments, tell me what touched you the most in this story, or which idea touched your heart. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more profound and thoughtful literature. Your smallest opinion encourages us to create better content. Stay connected, keep thinking, and dive into the world of literature with us. Thank you.